Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, the publisher and editor of the Trends Journal, Gerald Celente, coming to us from New York. Hello, Mr. Celente.
Hello, Greg. Thanks for having me back.
Well, unfortunately, I am going to congratulate you on a prediction that is, if it's not there, it's close to it, war in the Middle East, which you clearly predicted more than a year ago that we're headed for war. We've got the first pieces of the 1st Armored Division in northern Jordan. We have the Hatfields in McCoy, Al-Qaeda, which is the Free Syrian Army, and Hezbollah with Assad, the Russians, the Chinese. We have the Israelis, which felt like they had to attack, not just a small little deal of attacks around Damascus, research facilities, and these 185-mile range precision missiles they're afraid of Hezbollah getting a hold of. It looks like we're headed for war, yet the mainstream media is giving this a big yawn. What say you? Where are we headed?
Well, they're giving it a big yawn, and when they do talk about it, they talk about it only in a one-dimensional aspect. So, for example, the news that's been making the news in America over the last few days is, it's a tragedy, of course, but it's not national news when there's women that were in a wedding party died in a car crash in California. And yes, it's a tragedy about the young women that were kidnapped and been held hostage by these sickos for a number of years. But that should not be the top news story when you have a news story evolving and unraveling, such as Israel attacking Syria. Now, there's a number of things as trend forecasters that we look at. You'll often notice, Greg, that big events happen on weekends. For example, they closed the banks in Cyprus recently. They did it on a weekend. When Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, he did it on New Year's Eve in 2011. And that, of course, stripped us of our 5th, 6th, and 4th Amendment rights. So they do these things when people aren't paying attention. And Israel attacked Syria over the weekend. After the markets closed, it made the news. So here was the headline when that happened. Israel's strike on Syria hit arms from Iran. And I was thinking to myself, what if the headline read, Iran's strike on Israel hit arms from U.S.? What's the difference? Oh, I know the difference. Only Israel and the United States are allowed to have arms. Iran and Syria aren't allowed to have any. And if God forbid, Hezbollah should have any. And when I say the story is one-sided, it's this one-sided fairy tale that Israel struck Syria to stop those arms from flowing into the hands of Hezbollah. And of course, when you look at the facts that start coming out, it's kind of like what happened up in Boston. The story keeps changing. Oh, you remember up in Boston, those kids robbed the 7-Eleven. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, they were armed to the teeth. No, they weren't. They had one 9mm weapon, ostensibly, when they got caught. Oh, and that kid, when they had him in the boat, it was a face-off between the police. There were, 9,000 of them, against this kid with a pistol. And they find out the kid was just laying there. There was no fairy tale. They hit these trucks that were just going over the Lebanon border, and they were packed with missiles. No, they didn't. They were attacking military sites in Damascus, as they did this time as well. And the reports vary, Greg, from 40 to 300 soldiers and civilians that were killed in the area around Damascus, the sites being both military installations and the most threatening installation of them all, a poultry farm. Now let's change this around a little bit. Suppose it was Tel Aviv that was bombed with such, and by the way, these weapons that the Israelis were using, of course, highly sophisticated, and under U.S. agreements, any weaponry received by Israel from the United States paid for, of course, by the American taxpayer at a tune of over $3 billion a year. They're not supposed to be used to attack foreign countries. But be that as it may, I think they had a little bit more firepower than those pressure cookers up in Boston. But of course, this doesn't get any media, as you're pointing out, as ostensibly hundreds of people have been killed and an attack on a sovereign nation that has done nothing to threaten Israel. And before I end this, I would also like to talk about the misinformation coming out from President Obama. Of course, they always say that Israel has the right to defend itself. I want to make this really clear. So does everybody else, including me and you.
Iran said that they're going to have a crushing response. Syria, a high-ranking member, said the door is wide open. They also, a high-ranking member of the Syrian, Assad regime, said that this is an act of war. Other people are calling it an act of war. Is this going to touch off a wider regional war, if not a world war? I mean, Kerry's up talking to the Russians. They have a naval base in Tartus on the Syrian coast. I mean, this thing could spiral out of control, could it not? Or am I just being chicken little?
No, it is spiraling out of control. As I said, suppose it wasn't Damascus, it was Tel Aviv that was struck. This is a major city. This isn't some backwater town. This is a metropolitan city that was attacked. And as I was saying, the spin coming out, Obama also saying that Hezbollah has threatened to attack Tel Aviv. That's right. They said that if Israel attacked again in Lebanon. But nobody is ever supposed to strike back, neither the United States nor Israel. They're the only ones that are allowed to attack other countries. And when other countries retaliate, it's the golden rule, by the way, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Oh, they cry and scream, terrorism, terrorism. No, it's not. It's payback.
Do you think?
And that's
you think payback's
and that's
coming?
what we're going to see more of. It's payback. Look what happened when France invaded Mali. As soon as it happened, the Malians said they were going to pay back the language. We wrote it in the Trends Journal, just as it happened. They said France was going to suffer a payback. Virtually days later, there was the Algerian hostage crisis. So when are people going to get it in their heads that you cannot attack other countries without them not attacking you?
So let's talk about the chessboard here. We're involved. The U.S., Chuck Hagel said a few weeks ago, gave Israel the green light. That's what was reported. Well, it was a pretty good report because a couple of weeks later, we had these multiple attacks on the research facilities and these missiles with reportedly 185-mile range, which to the Israelis, to their good, they're afraid of these missiles raining down on them, hitting just about every target in Israel. Lots of sin to go around. Not talking about that. Is this thing getting ready to spin out of control? I mean,
it is out of control.
We have armored divisions, pieces of it in northern Jordan. We have our naval ships in the Mediterranean. Russia has their ships in the Mediterranean. This is getting to be a bit of a pressure cooker, isn't it?
It is. It is out of control already. What are people waiting for? An Archduke Ferdinand moment? That's all that is. People are waiting for the flashpoint. These things flashpoints don't happen overnight. They ignite from all of these firestorms that they keep setting off. So as you mentioned about Jordan, the United States is training these so-called Syrian rebels, these Islamist fundamentalists in Jordan. They have Patriot missile batteries on the borders of Turkey going into Syria, facing into Syria. Now you have this moron Mendez, the senator from New Jersey, talking about supplying the rebels with more armaments. And by the way, you look up who this little weasel clown is, this little piece of crap, Mendez, and what is he's caught in prostitution scandals and money changing scandals, buying, getting kickbacks that they call political campaigns for doing dirty deals with his buddies, and now he's out there. We have to send more arms to the Syrian rebels, and we're going to vet them. What are you talking about? And the same thing with John Insane McCain and Lindsey Graham. How could people listen to these little weasels that are screaming for war? And most Americans, by the way, they couldn't find Syria on the map if you left them, if you gave them, a circle with 15 countries around it to try to target it. So they're taking us to war once again under a weapons of mass destruction kind of scenario, but this time it's, if they cross that red line of using chemical weapons on their people, then that's just too much for us. And once again, Greg, it's kiddie talk. A red line, no options off the table. You know how sick I am of hearing these BS lines? How about, again, when you look at the reports coming out from the United Nations saying that, hey, wait a minute, it wasn't the Syrian government that used those chemical weapons, it was the rebels. Yeah, no, don't believe them, believe us. We're going to use the same investigators that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So it's one lie built upon another. And again, when all else fails, with the economy declining, they take you to war.
Is this going to be the final nail in the coffin for the economy? I mean, is this going to kibosh the QE, kill what's remaining of the weak economy? If oil gets cut off, or if Iran does strike Israel, is Israel going to then strike Iran's nuclear program? Are they going to shut off the Strait of Hormuz? Are they going to close down, the Suez Canal? Are they going to start choking the lifeblood oil of the world, and everything, shoots up? Gas is $8, $9, $10 a gallon. Interest rate swaps go haywire. Markets implode. Could that happen? Will that happen?
All of the above. All of the above. As I've said many times, if Israel attacks Iran, it's the beginning of World War III. I've said this scenario, it has to be a couple of hundred times. History is repeating itself. The panic of '08 mirrors the crash of 1929. Following the crash of 1929, we went into the Great Depression. There's a depression going on. You look at John Williams' shadow stats. It's 23% unemployment when you look at the people that have dropped off the unemployment rolls, temporary workers and part-time workers wanting full-time jobs. You look at the unemployment rate in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy. These are depression level in some of those areas, and they still call them a recession. Almost 28% in Greece and Spain, and they're still calling it a recession. Again, crash, depression, currency wars. There's currency wars going on. All of the countries, Japan, United States, Europeans, the Chinese, they're all trying to devalue their currencies so they can export more product. Trade wars and then real wars. And that's what we're seeing again. You had mentioned briefly about the ports in Syria where the Russians use as a port, as well as the Chinese. It's the only port in the Mediterranean that's open to either the Russians or the Chinese. This is a proxy war against Iran, because once Syria is choked off and choked, then Iran is left alone, surrounded by enemies. So that's what we're really looking at here. The end game is Iran, and as I've said also, these are the Persians. They've been around a long time. This isn't beating Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or Assad. this is a real power. People forget that Iraq fought Iran for 8 years in the 1980s, a war started, by the way, by Jimmy Carter, carried on by Reagan. And the Iranians lost 1 million people and didn't give up 1 inch of land.
Gerald Celente. So if we're going to be looking at this Syrian situation, where are we going to be in 6 months, in a year, or 3 months?
It's hard to go by a timetable, because when you even listen to the Syrians and the Iranians, I mean, Syria's no match for Israel. You know, they have these old MiGs, you know. I mean, Israel has the most advanced weaponry outside the United States. So they're not going to do anything. You're going to see it, I believe, in forms of what they're going to call terror strikes. Maybe a little dirty bomb going off over, maybe in Tel Aviv. You know, that kind of thing happening. And then escalating from there. And I don't believe Iran is not going to attack anybody. Iran will respond to an attack, but they won't initiate one. But of course I say that, but who knows how it will be framed? Because after all, Greg, you certainly remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got the United States into the Vietnam War.
Total lie.
And it was a big lie. It never happened the way they said it did. And you also, as I mentioned, you remember how we began the Iraq War. You know, it was because of weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda that didn't exist. But who cares? And then, of course, there was the Afghan War. You remember what we were going to Afghanistan for, or maybe you forgot. It was to get those bad guys, them Al-Qaedas, and Saddam, what's his name? Osama bin Laden. And that's why we went into Afghanistan. And again, we've written about this in chapter and verse, about all the lies that were told and how they're forgotten and how the wars continue.
I guess your prognosis for the next year or two, it looks like we're going to be into some pretty heavy war, if not a world war. Is that right?
Yes. And what's the saddest thing about it, particularly in America, is that this is so against what this nation was founded upon, the beliefs of our founding fathers, and where it's been taken by presidential psychopaths and sociopaths. You know, George Washington, I mean, there was a real commander-in-chief, not one that plays basketball or was in the National Guard or never in the military. And of course, I'm going back to Obama, Bush, II, and Clinton. And they're not commanders-in-chief. If they're commanders-in-chief, let them lead the charge. And when I talk about America, of course, you know, I know the slaughter that went on and how the native populations and the inequalities that existed in this country in its growing stages. Nonetheless, this was a great country at one time. And now it's totally off base upon which it was founded upon. There should be outrage from every American citizen about becoming involved in foreign entanglements. And I wrote about the blowback that would happen long before it's happened. In my books, Trends 2000, I coined the term Crusades 2000. The United States would be waking up in the new millennium, and the Crusades would be raging. I wrote that back in 1995. So you can see where all this is leading, and sadly it's leading us down the path of destruction, and in a way that's so against everything that this nation has been founded upon.
You are predicting world war coming. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I am, as if the trends continue and if the people don't do something to stop it. You know, one of our trends journals, the top trends for 2012, I have the solution. Gerald Celente's 4 rules of peace. Rule number 1, any commander-in-chief, prime minister, chancellor that declares war against another country has to lead the charge. If it was good enough for Washington and Napoleon and Alexander the Great, it should be good enough for these guys. And if they don't want to lead the charge, then let's have the world leader face-off, fight to the finish at the Arena di Verona, that beautifully restored Roman amphitheater in Verona. And let them go at it. You want to take the cat out? Go for it. Rule number 2. Anybody that's for war, and I remember what happened with the Iraq War and the Afghan War. I saw more yellow ribbons and American flags flying than you could imagine in a lifetime. Anybody that supports the war, go fight the war. And if you can't fight the war because you're too elderly or infirm, send your money, send your kids, and send your wife and whoever else to go do the fighting. They need you over there. We're outsourcing all our war support to military contractors. Rule number 3, the golden rule. When they retaliate, don't cry and bellyache and call it terrorism. It's payback. And rule number 4, let the people vote. The burden of the war falls on our shoulders. I mentioned the 58,000 that were killed in Vietnam, the 250,000 that have committed suicide. I've mentioned, how about all those Iraqi and Afghan veterans that have fought wars for nothing, and the dead ones, 6 dead this week in Afghanistan, and their families that have been ruined. So let the people vote. We do not have a representative form of government in the United States. We have a gang of 535 senators and congressmen deciding for 315 million of us. If we could vote online, if we could bank online, we could vote online. Let the people vote to go to war. And you will see, if Gerald Celente's 4 rules of peace are initiated, there will be no more wars.
Gerald Celente, publisher and editor of the Trends Journal, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Hey, thank you, Greg.